Hello, everybody. This is David Roldán Martinez, Head of Sales and Business Development at API Quality. Today, we are going to talk about API governance and how to deliver and embrace an API governance strategy within a company. Well, here you have the agenda. First, we will see how APIs are rising in adoption. This is something that we already know, but with the advent of AI, it's a trend that is really increasing. In such a scenario, an API governance, putting an API governance strategy in place is even more important than ever. And then they will see how we can basically put in place this kind of strategies. And then I will remark some conclusions. Okay, let's start with the rise of APIs. Well, the rise of APIs has it's due first because AI, mainly if we relate APIs with AI, we will see that the number of APIs are rising every day. Why? Because although everybody is talking about AI is something that is not coming alone. It comes with APIs and also with data, and data are spread all across the universe of the company. And APIs, it's one of the best options, or I would say the most flexible or the better option to consume and to exposure data. So as much as AI increases in adoption, also APIs and data governance are coming. Integrations in such scenarios are also critical. So this means integrations means also APIs. So as a consequence, we can find APIs almost everywhere. APIs are critical in integrations. APIs are critical also for RPA. APIs are also critical for LLMS. So as you can see, everybody everywhere APIs are everywhere. Okay, which is the consequence? The consequence is that as much as your API ecosystem size increases, also does the complexity of your API strategy. So one data from Gartner says that almost the half of the APIs available there in the world will go unmanaged. What does this mean? This mean that we have a great space for API governance adoption. So, but what does API governance means? Well, we can find a lot of definitions, but I have chosen only two because I think that they are, they integrate all the others. First, API governance is a practice which is in charge of defining standards, policies, processes that are used in an organization and related, of course, with API. This means that we have to be able to know pristine clear what is happening in our API ecosystem, who is doing what and with which tools. Then another definition of API governance is from Mark Boyd. Hi, Mark. Which refers to the process of structuring and being able to track each event that happens within our API ecosystem. That means, as I mentioned before, to be able to know who does what, in which state of the API lifecycle, and with which tools. This is very important for decision making. And remember that why we are doing API governance at a basic way in a company, in essence, because what we want to do is to keep the alignment between the company strategy, business strategy, I mean, and the API strategy. API and every technology in a company is here just for one simple reason: to make business, to help the company to boost their business. Okay, so how we put in place an API governance initiative? Wow, an API governance is very complex, as companies are. So there are involved a lot of departments. In fact, all the departments of the company, a lot of people. Remember that technology is never a problem, but people is. So we have to also to consider how we are going to migrate from the previous structure to the new one. How to do that? Well, I recommend to follow an structured approach. Here you have a snapshot of platformable from MacBoy approach. As you can see, it's very well structured. Well, structuring API governance ensures consistency, security, compliance, even adoption. Why? Because you can depict crystal clear where best practices can be applied, and also define accelerators that will help the organization to embrace those best practices, reducing the complexity. Well, this which are the objectives of a well-defined API governance framework? Acceleration, which means to be able to reduce the cost of the adoption of API governance. Flexibility. The main aim of API governance is to offer an homogeneous management of your API ecosystem, but that by ruling the system and defining standards, but those rules have to be flexible enough to include exceptions. Then we have to be able to measure everything in our organization, so that we can keep improving in every step of the way. Business focus is also one important point. As I mentioned before, the main aim of API governance is to keep the alignment with business strategy. It also has to leave a space for innovation and government, as it is based in defining standards. Okay, how we can approach to that? Well, I like to distinguish in API governance frameworks 3 levels. The first one is the strategic level, which is the one in charge of keeping the mentioned alignment between API strategy and business strategy. At this level, we find we get the commitment of the board of directors of the company with the API economy and business models defined for the strategy. Here, remember that we are talking about how to make business based on APIs. Then at a lower level, we have the tactics. At this level, once the strategy is completely settled down, at the tactics level, what we do is to start defining actions and lines of actuation and platforms, community policies that will allow us to reach or to achieve those strategy objectives we've mentioned in the previous level. And finally, at the operational level, we have the API lifecycle management, which is the API lifecycle and all the processes, toolsets, security, analytics, and so on top of that life cycle is the set of steps that each API goes through in their from their creation or inception to the point of time they are retired. If you take a look at this life cycle, at the core of the API governance framework is divided in two loops. The bigger loop, which is its focus in producer, is the traditional life cycle. It's related with which are the steps I need to create an API. Later, we will see that this part of the life cycle, the producer loop, can be boosted using API ops, for example. Well, not for example, API ops. And then also in the life cycle, we can see the consumer loops. I mean, APIs are here to be consumed. You can have the best technically designed API, but if nobody consumes your API will be useless. So today, in the API economy, where APIs are a product, that's where the API as a product come from. It's very important also to put the API in the market, right? So how we can do that? Okay, here I have made a summary of what an API governance really means from 6 points of view. These 6 points of view, or these 6 topics, are complementary. For example, first we have the government or the governance office. The duties of this office is to define the workflows related with API. That means who are involved in the API lifecycle in each of the stages we mentioned in the former slide. Who is involved in each of those steps, which tasks are related with each of the steps, and also the internal processes we need to implement those tasks. Also, tools are important. Tools should be also standardized. Why? Because in this way we can improve the customer success management of our teams. Referring with teams, not only the internal ones, but also if you are building an ecosystem of partners, also your partners or other third parties development on top of APIs. Then also in the governance office, we can find the standardization part, which is defining the rules that your API has to follow. Those rules can be not only the best practices and style and design guide, but also regulations. I mean, for example, if your organization is a financial services one or a fintech, you have to be compliant with some regulations, FIDA, DORA, etc. So, including this compliance at the very early stages of the life cycle can help you to build a competitive advantage on top of regulation. Also, at the governance office, you define the metrics, which is API scoring. So it's great to do that because it allows you to measure the quality of your API ecosystem, and also you define how to manage your API catalog. At the other side, we have the API governance operation, which means, okay, I have defined the standards, but I also have to provide the means to implement those controls. Here we can find supporting guides and manuals, the tool selection of the tools that will be used across all the organization, the API lifecycle in the terms we've seen in the former slide, how compliance is going to be dealt, and also analytics and KPIs and other indicators. Another important bubble here is the Acceleration and Innovation Center. Here we focus on evangelization, we focus on training and skill set building, we focus in Gen AI, and also in onboarding processes, both from users and developers. At the other side, we can find the API infrastructure, which is the technology we need to support API governance. The API management platform is here, also architecture organization, also if you have to create custom integrations, and especially here, it's where we can find API ops hyperautomation. Well, another important point here is the enablement center, which is more focused on strategy. Remember that the framework has three layers: strategy, tactics, and operations. This enablement center is more focused in the strategy one. And at the other side, we have the integration office, when you can find the API factory and also how we can help the company, the third party, and also internal departments to develop and to use APIs in integrations. Okay, so you can do this. Let's focus on automation briefly, because we are almost run out of time. Remember, if you can all of this manually, but doing that manually is expensive, and it has also no sense. Why? If we have DevOps from so long, why not to apply DevOps practices to APIs? Also, doing manually, it's complicated. There are a lot of tools involved in API development. You have the API design, but also testing, but also linting, but also greasing, but also fuzzing, but also a lot of but also a lot of additional tools. So if we were able to automate the interaction and the transition between different tools, we will be getting a less failure process, and with in such a complex systems and myriad of tools, there isn't a visual user interface to make this process more easy. So what we have to do is to automate everything. Okay, so now I'm going to remark some conclusions. First, that API governance helps you to consolidate competitive advantage through standardization and compliance from the very beginning or if you put the focus on standardization and compliance at the very beginning stages of the API lifecycle. Second, that my advice would be to define a structured framework that this is the alignment between APIs and business strategy, and help you to focus on key topics, and of course rely on hyperautomation. We can help you with hyperautomation. For any questions or whatever, just ping me. Thank you very much.